Honoured Kustos, honoured opponent, honoured audience. Who cares what music teachers teach, as long as it's good music? This seems like a simple enough question and a reasonable enough position for anyone to take, but it's a question I've been grappling with for the last 4 years. So in introducing my dissertation, I thought I'd begin by trying to explain just why we should care what music teachers teach and what the problem is with good music. Numerous researchers from different disciplines such as sociology, psychology, and cultural studies agree that music is important to young people. Teenagers engage with music in ways that help them understand and explore who they are and who they are becoming. Music can make or break relationships. Music preferences can be seen on display on the street through the clothes you choose to wear. Engaging with different musics is related to how we behave. Just think about the differences between how you might talk to others or dance at a hard acid dubstep rave or an outdoor reggae festival. Music is not simply an artifact to consume, but a way to reflect and construct who we are as individuals and social groups. In Finland, including popular music as part of school lessons has been seen as a way to motivate teenage students to learn. It has been seen as an accessible medium for teaching and learning, drawing on students' own musical worlds, experiences, and knowledge. This establishes some relevance and a continuum between the content of school lessons and life outside of classroom walls. In addition, it has been argued that popular music offers a more achievable, authentic, hands-on approach to performing music in schools, in contrast to, say, trying to replicate the 1812 overture with 20 kids and no cannons. In this way, popular music is seen to enable the participation and inclusion of all students and offer a democratic approach to teaching and learning music in schools. However, if you are the parent of a teenager, have taught teenagers, or were ever a teenager yourself, it comes as no surprise that not all popular musics are considered good by all people. Now, what my parents had to put up with blaring from the boombox in my bedroom as when I was a teenager is perhaps of less consequence than the music selected for the classroom, with schooling assuming responsibility not only for the academic growth of young people, but their social, emotional, and psychological well-being as well. This suggests that there is a different ethic of care on the shoulders of the music teacher than if we were to limit music education to teaching and learning guitar chords, recognizing the structure of a sonata, or reciting the music history of various eras and composers. Considering that the media and researchers have also associated certain popular musics with adolescent feelings of alienation, drug use, suicide risk, sexual permissiveness, anti-authoritarianism, rebellion, and belonging to any number of counterculture social groups, questions may be raised just as to how these popular musics fit with the teacher's ethic of care. Indeed, one might ask whether the sex and drugs of rock and roll has any place in the classroom at all. My research has focused on how secondary school music teachers navigate this tension between ideas of popular music as good music that provides opportunities for all students to participate, and ideas of certain popular musics as inappropriate for the classroom. What's the problem with good music? Well, that all depends on whose good we're talking about. If I were to ask you now what your favourite band or song is, and scoff at his ideas of what good music is, and in turn praise her more refined tastes, some of you might feel a certain solidarity with me, in agreement over what is good music and what is not. Others might figure out that I have no idea what I'm talking about and tune out for the next couple of hours, hanging around only out of politeness and the anticipation of a glass of sparkling wine at the end. It is exactly in this way that as a teacher selects a song or piece of music to perform or listen to in class, a music is validated by the authorities of the school community as one worthy of school attention. It is legitimized as good music. In turn, if a student is told that the music that they listen to, enjoy, and identify with, the music that they think is good music, has no place in school, they may well understand this as the school having no place for them either. My research aimed to develop both theoretical and practical ways to understand how certain popular musics come to be understood as problematic in school contexts, how teachers make decisions about which popular musics to include and which to exclude, and the implications of these for inclusion and democracy in the music classroom, the idea that school music is for everybody. I interviewed 5 Finnish secondary school music teachers working with students in grades 7 to 9, with students between 13 and 15 years old. These teachers worked in different regions of Finland and in different kinds of schools, including comprehensive, Swedish-speaking, and music-specialized schools. I planned to meet with each teacher 3 times. The first interview was to get an idea of teachers' musical and educational backgrounds. The second was to focus on particular instances where teachers felt that they had encountered problems in relation to popular music, and learn how they had responded to these challenges. The third interview was intended as an opportunity to clarify anything that remained unclear and double-check that I had understood what the teachers had shared with me correctly. The first 2 interviews lasted between 1 and 2 hours each. After transcribing these first 2 interview rounds, I conducted a preliminary analysis, and I realized I had a problem. Perhaps because I'm a foreigner, teachers had all very kindly spent a lot of time explaining to me how music education in Finland works. Their responses to my questions often began with, "Well, in Finland we," or "Finnish teachers do." Although this was helpful and interesting, I realized that we had spent so much time on broad generalizations on what happens in Finnish music classrooms that we had maybe neglected what my research really aimed to understand, the why. And what for? I needed a way to disrupt this relationship that had emerged, me as ignorant immigrant, and teachers as translators of official policy and cultural norms. I felt that it was necessary to communicate to the participating teachers that they had been heard, and focus the discussions more on their own personal experiences than broader stories of what we do here in Finland. Narrative researchers in music education have suggested that story is a means by which we might trouble certainty and raise questions concerning the taken for granted. And this was exactly what I needed to do. Reconsidering the final interview as an opportunity to learn together and engage in meaning-making with the teachers through story, I looked again at my preliminary analysis. I highlighted similarities and common themes between the teachers' interview data, as well as dissenting voices, uncertainties, teachers or my own questions that remained unanswered, and issues that I felt were unresolved. I began crafting what I termed factional stories. Factional stories were 1 page long each and incorporated bits and pieces of raw data, my preliminary analysis, my emerging theoretical framework, and questions that had been raised by teachers and myself. They were written from the perspective of an anonymous music teacher and voiced a polyphony of the 5 teachers and myself as researcher. I shared these 4 factional stories with each teacher 2 weeks before the final interviews were scheduled. 3 of the teachers brought notes that they had written on the stories to discuss during the interviews, and all of the interviews lasted considerably longer than the first 2. Actually, 1 teacher insisted on driving me to the airport. I planned to catch the bus, because after 5 hours of talking, she felt that there was still more to talk and learn about together. I felt that the relationship between the teachers and myself changed to one where we were collaboratively engaged in learning and problem finding. Teachers and I read these factional stories together, trying to figure out what is going on here, why, and what for. Analysing the data from these 3rd meetings alongside the data from the earlier interviews, my research findings suggest that if we hope to include popular musics in the classroom as democratising practices, there are 2 processes occurring in classrooms that warrant attention. These 2 processes are mentioned by name in the title of my dissertation, censor and censorship, each of which I will explain in turn. The mechanisms by which music is defined as inappropriate or problematic may be seen to relate to the ideas and ideals of what good music is in schools. To understand these processes, I turn to sociologist Colin Sumner's theory of social censure. In line with his theory, the definitions of what is good music and what is not are moral matters. As the school community negotiates moral boundaries, certain musics are deemed good for school lessons, and others are seen to deviate from the norms of propriety. Negative understandings or portrayals of certain musics are the result of social censures, negative judgments or denunciations that are produced and expressed through dynamic and complex power relations. These highly contextualized moral and political discourses are not one-directional instances of the powerful labeling certain musics as problematic and everybody else just accepting it. Rather, they are constantly contested and renegotiated as part of broader ideological and moral debates. We could think here of Elvis's very famous pelvis. Whereas the guardians of public morality were shaken to their core with the concerns that Elvis's dance moves might rouse the sexual passions of teenage youth, as though they would otherwise be spared from such passions, his record sales alone suggest that these concerns were not universal, and his music and music videos are now included in many a school lesson with barely a second thought. While this example might seem fairly quaint, this does not make it irrelevant for today's music teachers, perhaps contending with twerking in the classroom as our contemporary equivalent. As was the case so often for Elvis's pelvis, absent from television broadcasts of his performances, one strategy by which moralities and social censures are sanctified and reinforced is through censorship. Censorship has traditionally been thought of as acts of silencing, positioned in opposition to free speech. Accordingly, research on acts of censorship have often focused on authoritative state, religious, or other institutional powers restricting the expressions of others, in particular, expressions that have been deemed to be immoral or harmful for society. However, as highlighted by Sumner's theory of social censure, immoral and harmful are relative judgments and are part of broader ideological negotiations and contestations. As such, which or whose expressions or behaviours warrant censorship are complicated by competing moral crusades that seek to define and enforce different ideas of the good and, in turn, the deviant. To attend to this complexity, I have turned to the work associated with new censorship theory. This theory has built upon the work of Karl Marx, Michel Foucault, Pierre Bourdieu, and Judith Butler in envisioning censorship as more than one-directional acts of silencing by the powerful. In new censorship theory, and in my dissertation, censorship is rather seen as a process, as multifaceted, as inclusive, and even productive in the generative sense. Censorship may best be seen as a continuum between repressive silencing and the productive framing of agency, determining what is possible for who and in what form. In this way, censorship is not simply the means by which interaction is framed or constrained, but it is part of these daily interactions themselves. Beyond the welfare concerns for impressionable youth, the reason why censorship features in the school context may be seen as part and parcel of community building, and this is particularly where we can see censorship as both silencing and productive. Censorship here is about delimiting who the school community is and who it should be, and making situational judgments to form the values and knowledge within that community. In turn, those who do not fit within these moral boundaries are cast as outsiders. The term censorship originates from the Latin censor, denoting a magistrate or critic, and the verb censere, meaning to assess, to value, judge, or appraise. Accordingly, the term is intimately connected to ideas of value, of ethics, and of teaching and of moral guidance. To censor is, at least in part, to tell another, I know what is best for you. Which, or rather whose popular musics are selected for the classroom, may thus be seen as both the realization and negation of freedom, resulting in both inclusion and exclusion. With this in mind, in my dissertation, I do not assume a position to argue for or against censorship. As literature sociologist Michael Hultquist reminds us, To be for or against censorship is to assume a freedom no one has. Censorship is. In keeping with this theoretical understanding of censorship, I do not position the teacher as autocratic censor. The teacher does not create or enforce moral boundaries in isolation. Rather, my research found that the teacher negotiates and navigates a variety of censorious forces and narratives that draw associations between certain musics and constructions of deviance, referred to in my work as the school censorship frame. For the teachers I spoke to, the narratives of the school censorship frame included broad and specific, interrelated, competing, and dynamic stories that provided suggestions or frames for teachers' repertoire choices. The broad narratives included the Finnish music education curriculum and the surrounding religious and cultural social environment. More specific narratives that teachers took into consideration when selecting popular repertoire included narratives of themselves as teacher, of their students, of parents, of other staff members and principals, and of the school as an institution. Remembering that people construct their identities with and through music, I don't mean to suggest here that music is neutral and only assumes meaning as the school censorship frame assigns it a label of good, bad, or anything else. The teachers I spoke to mentioned 4 aspects of music that they considered in determining whether or not a music was appropriate for their students. These were lyrics, imagery such as music videos, musical mood, and emotional effect. However, the school censorship frame doesn't simply alert teachers to specific lyrics, imagery, moods, or emotional effects, offering a clear set of guidelines to adhere to for all situations. Many of the teachers that I spoke to referred to the decisions that they made as a line drawn in water, firm decisions that almost immediately dissolve and disappear, requiring the teacher to begin again with each situation. With such impermanent ideas of what good music is and is not, and without a curriculum that outlines prerequisite musical content for classrooms, the Finnish teacher must navigate the changing and contested meanings of popular musics without any stable voice of authority to turn to. This requires considerable reflection and moral deliberation according to each context and situation. As one of the participating teachers emphasized, I have to ask myself questions where I'm right and where I'm not right, and what is right. Yet, recognizing the situatedness of these moral decisions is only the very beginning of decision-making. Without a universal ethical framework to guide the teacher as to what good music is once and for all, moral deliberation is not only about the whats, hows, whys, and whos of music education, but also the what for, who for, and to what ends. As the teacher selects certain musics over others and consequently legitimizes certain morals, knowledge, and goods over others, repertoire selection always excludes somebody. The process of deciding what is good music for the classroom is both the site and the product of immense contestation. This is why we should care what music teachers teach, particularly if music education in schools is supposed to be inclusive and democratic, offering opportunities for all students to participate. It is clear that popular music is not an easy answer. Indeed, the introduction of popular music to schools has made the teachers' repertoire decisions considerably more complex. This is a good thing. By recognizing the social censures and censorship processes that politicize repertoire selection, and the school classroom as encompassing diverse and contrasting musical preferences, identities, cultures, and values, teachers and students might be able to engage in critical reflections and negotiations that extend beyond fixed notions of what constitutes a good music or a good student. The invitations and surprises embedded in such necessary conflicts may create new opportunities and spaces for inclusive, democratizing practices in schools. This involves taking a risk to open the doors to the outsiders of school music lessons, the uncomfortable tensions and disagreements of making and enacting the curriculum, and to recognize a sense of possibility and promise in the uncertainty that these entail and engender. one of the teachers was talking about what comes next after she had selected a song for the class. She said, "We can never know what will happen." And I think that's quite exciting. And I hereby call upon you, honoured opponent, as the opponent appointed by the Sibelius Academy's Academic Council, to evaluate my doctoral dissertation and to present the critical comments you deem it deserves.
Thank you, Alexis.